Hello, and welcome to BASECAMP, the best way to start your day. I'm Jack, and I'm really glad that you joined us. BASECAMP is a tool that helps you develop the habit of spending daily time with God. And in our last BASECAMP, we introduced Act 2 of Exodus and dove into understanding who the Pharaoh is and why he doesn't want to let God's people go. God comes along and asks him to give up a large portion of what helped build all of his success. The slaves that are making bricks and building his kingdom. So, of course, his response is, no thanks, I've got this under control, I don't need you. But God has something to say about that in response. You know, when God said, I'll bring my mighty hand down upon you? Yeah, well, it's time. So go ahead and open up those Bibles to Exodus chapter 7. We're going to start reading in verse 14, but we're going to cover a lot of ground today and catch all the way up to chapter 8, verse number 19. God is about to do some crazy things here to show his power. He's going to send plagues to show not only Pharaoh, but all of Egypt his power. And first, he starts with the main thing that keeps Egypt going, the Nile River. Now, this isn't any ordinary river. This river is the only reason that they are able to grow crops and live where they do, and gives them transportation everywhere. The Nile River keeps Egypt alive. It is the most important part about where they live. So of course, God has to do something about that to get their attention first. So go ahead and read about the first plague in Exodus chapter 7, verses 14 through 20. So Moses and Aaron went and did exactly what God said. They went to the Pharaoh, and the exact thing that God said would happen happened. All the world turned into blood, and it smelled terrible. All of the fish died, and no one could drink any of the water. And if I were in Egypt, I would probably be so incredibly confused. Could you imagine there being just all of a sudden you're drinking a cup of water and it just turns into blood? It'd be super creepy. So this miraculous thing happens, and you're like, okay, cool. Surely this will rescue the Israelite people, and Pharaoh will come to his senses. Well, no. Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and he does not let God's people go. So it's time for round number 2. Plague number 2. We're going to jump in back end to chapter 8 now, and go ahead and read verses 1 through 6. Ew, right? Frogs everywhere. In your house, in your bed, on your body, just jumping all over the place. That's so incredibly gross. And surely that did something, right? Well, Pharaoh responds a little differently this time. It did do something. Keep reading in verses 8 through 15. So Pharaoh recognizes that the Lord is doing this and begs that the frogs be taken away. Pharaoh even says, I will let your people go as long as you get rid of them. So Moses and Aaron ask God to do it, and God does it. They take away the frogs. But guess what? Pharaoh went back on his word. He didn't release the people. So, you know what that means. Round number 3, God is back up to bat, and this one is even more gross than the last. Go ahead and read about the third plague in verses 16 through 19 of chapter 8. If you don't know, gnats are really, really tiny, gross bugs. They love to fly into tight spaces, and they love to hover around your ears and your eyes, and they're so incredibly annoying. And in this plague, they're everywhere. The passage says that they're like the dust on the ground. The Pharaoh's magicians even try to recreate this trick just to prove that God isn't really that powerful, and they had no luck. And now They are also convinced that this is the work of the Lord. But guess who's not convinced? Pharaoh. Pharaoh is stubborn and does not let God's people go. And now it's time for round number 4. But that's going to have to wait until next time. But here's the thing that I want us to understand from today. Obviously, things like this are kind of cool, right? Like, God is so powerful that he can turn water into blood and fill the land with frogs and gnats. That's awesome. That's crazy power. But this isn't a superhero movie that's made up. This happened here on earth in Egypt, a real place that exists. This is real. God, who is the creator and sustainer of all things, is so in control and so powerful that at any moment he can do miraculous things just like this. And if I were Pharaoh, I wouldn't want to mess with a God with this much power. And round 4 is coming. And we'll continue to unfold this story on the next episode of BASECAMP.